Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, and I'm Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and the Purple Territory Radio Network. Here with Mr. Joe Oberly, as always. How you doing, man? I feel like we haven't talked in a few days.
It's been a little while. I'm all right. It's Friday, so that's good.
Are you, what stage of grief are you at?
Oh, God. It's on to Cincinnati, Joe. No, it's, it's over. The season's over. You move on. You do other stuff. You put on the agenda, playoff predictions. I don't even know who's playing when this week. I had to go look it up. So,
me too.
I've moved on. It's the nature of the beast. Season's over.
It'd be nicer for you if the end of the season coincided with the start of the golf season. Like if it was nice outside. It'd probably be nicer for everybody. But you could just go out and add about 50 yards to your drive average just because of all of your anger.
I find it strange that I start seeing tweets and different things. All of a sudden, people start talking about the Twins, the baseball team. I go, are you kidding me? My God, that always kind of depresses me because it's like you move on to the winter sports that remain yet, but we're already talking about summer, and that means football's a long way off. So, but
yeah, there is a lot to talk about. A lot to analyze. This is kind of like the perfect storm for what I didn't want to happen on many levels, and I think the story from this morning encapsulates that perfectly. So I interact with this guy at the gas station usually 2 or 3 times a week, if not more, because I go over there to buy energy drinks so I can get up and get ready to respond to 4 hours worth of emails for the websites. And he knows that I was very out there early and verbally in regards to the Kirk Cousins thing, that I wanted the Vikings to sign him, and that I had defended him throughout the season on different levels. And so I don't know, he was so happy to see me this morning, and he had this big smile on his face, and I knew he was going to say something. And he said, "Did you hear that stat about Cousins?" And I said, "Which one?" And he goes, he's the first quarterback to have 4,000 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 10 or less interceptions, and a 70% completion rate. And then he goes, "And it means absolutely effing nothing. It means nothing." Like he was so happy to shit on my parade, basically.
He's right.
Well, he is right, but the way that he told me, is the last thing that I wanted was Vikings fans kind of tearing each other apart and finding what camp they're in. Are they in the pro or anti-Cousins, pro or anti-Zimmer, Prefer, so on and so forth. And that's just the way it works, I guess, but it just sucks. I didn't want that to happen.
That's the world we live in. You're a Republican or Democrat. You believe that there's a crisis on the border, or you believe that Trump just wants to get reelected. There's no in between. It's sad. It's silly. It's it's unfortunate because the world and football and everything else is full of so much nuance, but people want to be right or they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to talk about it in between. I really feel that's the way things are. And it is. As a moderate person in both politics and in my football following, I struggle with it because it's like, it's not that cut and dry, people, But that stat doesn't mean anything. That shouldn't give you glee. It should make you happy that he's an accurate passer when given time. He compiled some stats, but if you look at it, a lot of it was compiled in garbage time.
Mm-hmm.
he unfortunately too often that he performed well in ideal situations, but poorly in stressful situations. Now, that wasn't always the case. We saw him early on doing very well under pressure, but a year of pressure is going to make you, or a season of pressure is going to make you start flinching at the end, and I think that we saw some of that from him. So it's only natural, but it's, I don't know. I guess I'd rather have Keenum's season last year than Cousins this year, for the mere fact the Vikings were 13-3, but that's about it.
And it's funny you say that about the tribalism that's going on, because this occurred to me as I was falling asleep last night. I was on Andy Carlson's show twice. The second time I went down to the Blue Door Bar in near Dinkytown, and I'm 34 years old, but I look and sound a lot younger than I am, and I also look like a gigantic nerd. So Andy, just out of the blue, wasn't on the agenda or anything. Granted, he's not a big agenda guy in the first place. He said, "What's your opinion on esports? The future of esports? Video game sports, where people get together and play." And my answer was, I'm not a big proponent of esports. I don't think the future is that as bright as a lot of people do. I just can't imagine people paying money to go sit in a stadium to watch people play video games. And I saw his face kind of contort, and I think I lost him at that point. And it wasn't the most educated comment. And it occurred to me last night, what I should have said was, most sports are location based, and people grow up following the sports where they're from, and it's a huge badge of honor, it's a tribal thing, and esports don't really have that. It's not based on location, it's just based on who are you friends with, and because of that, I don't think people get as emotionally invested.
People actually do that?
Oh my God, it's huge.
No, they actually go and watch people play esports in a stadium, or they do.
It's not a stadium, but it's like an auditorium, and there's like thousands of people, and they really do. It's a lot big. It's big, huge in Asia, obviously, as Japan is the epicenter of video games.
These things weren't they created so you could participate rather than spectate?
You'd think so, but like even some of these mobile games, like app games, they have these huge conventions, and they do like 4-on-4, and it is getting a lot bigger than I don't pay a lot of attention to it, and in retrospect, had I known that was a question, I would have looked into it more, but it's getting really big. There's YouTube people who play video games who are making, $1 million a month just having people watch them. That's what my niece does. She watches people play video games on YouTube, and she's obsessed with it. But yeah, they get together and they go down to these big events, and the top teams play each other, and there's like thousands of people watching.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not my thing. I think I missed that a little bit. It's a younger generational thing. But anyway, the obvious big news of the week came with the news that the Vikings had kept their interim offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski, as the offensive coordinator for 2019 and perhaps beyond. But with the history of this team, he'll probably be gone. He did have, I think, 2 interviews with the Cleveland Browns.
Yep.
We talked about this last week, that it was good for him contractually to show the Vikings there was interest there. I wonder, there was a lot of a panic in the Vikings fan world about this offensive coordinator position because, there was the Mike Mularkey and I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Dick Coder? They both ended up going to the Falcons, so people were thinking, if Stefanski doesn't stay, then it's Hugh Jackson or a whole bunch of nobodies. And that was kind of my thought and concern in regards to Zimmer and this article that is turning into my manifesto about why I thought the Vikings should have moved on from Zimmer, but the fact that I knew they wouldn't. And then I just was wondering, like, what young up-and-coming offensive coordinator would want to come here, just based on what happened with DeFilippo. And so obviously I'm going to ask for your opinion, but I'll give you mine just really quickly. I feel that it's the best move they could have made for a number of reasons, but the main reason is that obviously he's the longest tenured coach on this staff, and he's been around and he's coached different positions underneath a few different offensive coordinators, and I feel that he can take what worked and looked at what didn't. I mean, we've had, including him now, you could even say 4 offensive coordinators now, including him, that had at least Diggs and Thielen to play with, and Kyle Rudolph. So he can see kind of, what to do, what not to do, how Zimmer works, what Zimmer wants, as opposed to bringing in someone fresh who hasn't had that experience. So I'm hoping he can especially look at what Pat Shurmur did with these skilled players and say, okay, this is what we're going to do moving forward. Perhaps as opposed to coming in and implementing a brand new system or whatever a different offensive coordinator would have done. So I am very happy with the move. I think it was, out of anybody that was rumored, I think this was the best move. And it calms me down a little bit, to be honest. What do you think, Mr.
Of what? Of Stefanski?
Of the move. Like, what was your reaction to it?
Well, there was stuff all along saying that he was never going anywhere. I mean, the word I heard was the Vikings offered him a contract a week ago, and he still went and took those interviews, and I was pleased that he did. For his own dignity, I guess he stuck it to Zimmer a little bit, who wouldn't let him go last year and interview for a job. He went and said, "Okay, you guys offered me this job. I got that in my back pocket. I'll make you sweat a little bit." And he went to Cleveland. And I was reading a story this morning. It was really close between him and Kitchens. And there was apparently Baker Mayfield's the guy who broke the tie. There's a story out there saying that he wanted Kitchens because he was familiar with him, and some people are saying they might have made a mistake in doing so, but if your quarterback's happy and that's who he's got to work with, that's a pretty powerful thing. So it sounds like it was really close that he could have been gone, and it would have been interesting had he done so. And it comes out that he had been offered a contract a week ago. I mean, Paul Allen was saying all along that it was going to be Stefanski. So it
would have been awful if he left.
Pardon me?
Maybe I'm interpreting it. I would have been interpreting it wrong, but if he left, I would have felt like, okay, that's not the best sign for Zimmer as a coach. Not to jump on your take or anything, but.
Well, yes, you are.
Not jump on your take, but I'm jumping on your take.
I think it could have got interesting there if he did go, and after the Vikings offered him a job, then all of a sudden they're scrambling for the scraps that remain, and they're looking like you just said that nobody wants this job because being the 4th or 5th guy, and so given that, I don't want to say that all of that is erased. I mean, I'm not going to say that nobody wants this job. Stefanski did, but who knows to what degree? Who knows how bad he wanted to go be head coach of Cleveland? I mean, with all due respect, I don't think he's ready. I mean, he's certainly probably ready to be an offensive coordinator since he was for 3 games and he knows what it's like and he's had all this training. But I don't think I would have hired him as a head coach, with the experience he's had, because that's a whole different thing. And it's I think there's you're saying who would want this job if he hadn't have gotten it. There's always somebody that up and comer that's gonna it wants to do it. I mean, look at how far. I mean, all this crud about the Sean McVay tree. They're reaching back to the Packers now have a former tight ends coach is their head coach, and it wasn't that long ago. I mean, he had a couple stops in between, and I guess that's all you need to call plays one year, and you're ready to be a head coach. But I don't know. It's I guess that's where new coaches come from, and I think there's the possibility that new people are being created every day, every season in that regard. So I don't know. You just hate when you get a good one to see him go, like Pat Shurmur. Yeah. And you hope that Stefanski's is ready to do this. Everybody says the right things, and but the proof's in the pudding. I said going into the last, great for against Miami, great against the Bears or the Lions, but show me what you can do against the Bears, and he didn't show me. So.
And I mean that Lions game too, that started out pretty bad. If that Hail Mary did help a lot with the momentum, and then the Lions turned into the Lions. I think my joke was the halftime adjustment was that the Lions looked at their jerseys and realized they played for Detroit, and that helped. There is the also the aspect that you touched on, which is the McVay tree, and we've talked a lot about how the NFL is a huge copycat league, and it seems like every team wants a young, like sub 40-year-old offensive-minded head coach right now, and I think that might have a lot to do with some of the stuff going on. I'm sure they could have found somebody, if not Stefanski. I have a feeling it would have been Hugh Jackson, just because Zimmer does like to work with people he's familiar with. But it's also, you have to throw out there that the league is really looking for these young guys. I haven't really...
Zimmer a dinosaur then?
Well, pretty much. And he's like he is the antithesis of that idea. He's super defensive minded. He's in his 60s. But I haven't really talked a lot to the Packers fans that I know to get their take on.
Oh, they're giddy.
Are they?
Giddy. Oh God, yes. But they don't sip the Kool-Aid. They take pictures of it and pour it over their heads. When something new happens, I think they were so relieved that Mike McCarthy's gone. If they had signed me, you'd have more of the same. But no, I think that's true. I mean, it's funny though. I mean, you call Zimmer a dinosaur because Nick Fott, I don't know, Fangio or however you say his name, from the Bears just went. He's 60 and he's going over to be head coach of the Broncos now. That may who knows if that's a good move or not. I'm cheering for him because as much as I do like new blood in the league and it's exciting and innovation to see things, I still like to think that the people that have been around and are experienced and know how the thing works have some worth too. I guess I feel the same way about covering the games too. Us old dinosaurs can still get her done, I guess. So
I am really surprised that, speaking of making moves, that the Raiders brought in Mike Mayock as their general manager. I've never been. I don't like Kuiper Jr. either, but Mayock, during these, if you watch the draft coverage on NFL Network these past decade, he speaks in such declarative statements that, okay, this is the guy they're going to take because of this, and then the exact opposite happens, and then he just washes his hands of it and moves on to the next guy and says, okay, and it is a very hard thing to do, to predict, but it just seems like he's so sure of it, and then when it's wrong, he doesn't even comment on it.
It's also TV. I mean, I'm sure that's what they tell him to do, Don't you're going to get how much wrong. I mean, same with those guys on ESPN. The guy with the helmet hair. What's his name?
Kuiper Jr.
Oh, yeah, Mel Kiper Jr. And then the other guy. They aren't going to sit out there and redress everything they've missed, because they're going to miss them. There's no two ways about it. And as soon as that first pick is taken in a draft, if it isn't the one that everybody had, it changes up the entire draft, and everybody's mock draft is thrown off. I mean, goes 5 minutes in, and it's like I can't blame him too much. I think he will be. I'm interested to see how he does in acquiring talent, because he certainly seems to recognize it. If he doesn't get that person to the right team, he certainly knows who's a good player and who's not because he's studied it for how long. And if he has that,
apparently he doesn't.
Pardon me?
I said apparently he doesn't, just based on how this might affect the Vikings and the fact that he had Treadwell as his number one receiver on his board in 2016, and that he wants to potentially acquire him or wait for the Vikings to cut him.
His daughter used to work for the Vikings, so maybe he's trying to help him out.
The Daily Norseman said they might trade for. I can't imagine what his
money. Just wait a year and get him for nothing. Jeez.
Yeah.
Vikings are probably going to cut him.
That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, and he obviously wouldn't be worth much. But
if the Vikings could get any pick out of him or any other body, I think it would be worthwhile. I think they got to cut bait there, but he still wants to be here, so who knows what's going to happen. And he's under contract, and there's all that. They're tight on cap space, so at some point, there's the advantage if you don't have to totally start over with somebody else in the position. But I don't know. I think.
Did he say something like after the season about wanting to stay here? Because I know you added that to the agenda, and then everything I saw was about the Raiders.
Yes, he did say he likes playing with these guys. He'd like to continue his career here, and it was like the last day locker room stuff on the cleanup when everybody's cleaning up their lockers. Reporters were in there, and I think he told somebody, "Yeah, I'd like to continue." It depends on how the question was asked. I don't remember the story, but that was the headline. He still thinks he can be a receiver in this league. He'd like to play here. These are my boys, that kind of thing. So, who knows? I don't, Zimmer and crew company don't ever have too much sentiment towards players. It's a business to them, and it has to be, and they let people come and go as they see fit to their needs. And I don't think you hang on to this guy because he's a former number one. You got to look at his value to the team and what he's produced and what you think going forward and what your needs are, and say, okay. And I say if you do all that, bye-bye Laquan. So,
going back to Stefanski really quickly, this is a hard question because, we only had those 3 games. But do you have any sort of sense on what type of offensive identity they might have next year? There's going to be a lot of new faces, or at least hopefully there will be on the line. But
if I were a betting man, I'd say they're going to run the ball.
I saw a guy last night at the liquor store, and he had one of those hats that you would immediately recognize. I don't know how to really describe it. It's it has like the gold bar on the top and the bottom, and then it says like something. It's 3-letter words twice. I don't remember what the original slogan was, but it was a play on that. And it said "Run Min," so R-U-N then M-I-N. And I said, "Where did you get that hat?" And he said, "Well, my dad got it for me." And it's a play on the popular hats that people are wearing. And I was really pissed that the Vikings weren't running the ball more, and so she got me this for Christmas, and it says "Run Minnesota" on it, basically, which I thought was really, really cool, and perhaps a trademark infringement. But yeah, you'd have to think that that's going to be the main thing they focus on is being able to do that. Whether or not they were capable is the question. We've talked a lot about this, so we don't need to rehash it very much. But I think the consensus between the two of us was that DeFilippo should have run the ball, even if it was, they were losing games, just because his boss was telling him to do so. But you saw with outside of the Dolphins game, which was against a terrible run defense. They just couldn't get, the offensive line was ending up getting pushed back, and it wasn't really realistic. But I look at, like we both said, that stat for Cousins means nothing because they weren't winning games. But throw a decent run game in there, throw some pass protection, and I think that it's going to be apples and oranges night and day next season. I really do. I still have faith in what they're doing, mainly because I have to. But I'm not completely discouraged, at least.
yeah, I don't know what his identity is going to be. I mean, he was running the offense that was already installed. 3 games to go. You can't switch it up and put your whole thing in there. He'll have a whole offseason with Cousins, still have an offseason, creating his own offense and installing it with these guys in a training camp and what have you. I don't know. I know it will be more to Zimmer's liking. That's what they've said. One of the best attributes is he knows what Zimmer wants. So, and I think what happens when you don't give Zimmer what you want. But speaking of which, really surprised. What?
I didn't reset. But no, I was just laughing.
Oh, you were laughing. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was that funny, but I'm surprised that defense had a sniff. I haven't heard his name mentioned once in all these offensive coordinator / head coaches.
That is, I didn't think about that.
Neither. It just occurred to me when you brought him up. I go, how come his name has not been bandied about? He is. I mean, apparently he's mud. It's just crazy. I mean, I don't know how he doesn't get a look for even an interview for offensive coordinator somewhere. It's just amazing.
That is
so many people.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And regardless of what happens, I'm sure he'll end up getting a job. But the fact that he is like on the bottom rung of he's not out there for the first set of interviews for any of these teams. You can't look at it any other way than to say that it's been a tremendous fall from grace for a guy that we were, when the Vikings signed him. I remember on the Purple Journal podcast saying that Stefanski might have been better because he could at least be here for at least 2 years, whereas DeFilippo's going to be a head coach, in the next year. But but hopefully they'll be able to accomplish a lot with him here for that year. And now he's not even getting any interviews for coordinator positions. It's
I find that amazing, or even any kind of position, a quarterback's coach or anything, or and that still could happen. But I don't know. I thought when he got fired, I said, "Oh God, he's going to get head coaching opportunities. He'll get another job." Just because the two guys didn't see eye to eye in philosophy, that doesn't mean he's a bad coach. So I'm really surprised that nothing's happened. Maybe there's just like everybody's out there chasing that hot new name, and they're not looking around and thinking, "Hey, the hot old name is suddenly out there." So I don't think he's that bad. I mean, when the beginning of the season, the Vikings offense was putting up some numbers, and until him and the head coach started scrapping, it was pretty good. So maybe it's a year off cooling off period. Maybe they have approached him and he said, "No, I'm going to take this year off and really figure out what I want to do or something." I'd be surprised at his age that he would do that, but who knows? It's strange. It's really strange that it hasn't happened. And maybe when everybody starts getting settled and there's still somebody out there that needs an offensive coach in some position, he will get a call. But it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, I'm sure that these coaches don't want somebody who won't listen to them. Maybe if that's just the first thing that pops in their mind when they think of him. Whether that's fair or not, I'm sure it's hugely detrimental. You just can't have that, and that's why again we kept saying, just run the ball, even if it's not working at all, just do it, because then Zimmer will see that you don't need to do it,
right?
That you can't do it.
And I agree with that. Nobody wants a guy that won't listen to you coming in and doing stuff on your staff. But by the same token, there's two sides to every story, And if you at least call the guy in for an interview, you can find out, okay, what the hell happened? We know what Zimmer's got out there about it. What happened from your side, and see if it's salvageable. But it's a little perplexing to me. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, he'll be back, I'm sure. But
I think so.
Speaking of the offensive line, the Vikings have got. I know that they're looking at Joe Philbin. They received permission from the Packers to interview him for that position. He was the offensive coordinator there for a while. He was the interim head coach after McCarthy got fired, which alone makes me one of my favorite people. He's been an offensive coordinator in college and in the pros, I think, at Arizona and Green Bay.
He was Matt Burke's coach at Harvard for a while.
Oh, wow.
And he's pretty high on him.
So, was he the head coach?
I think he was the offensive line coach, I believe.
Okay. Maybe they could bring Mike Tice back. Yeah, that's an encouraging move. I
think so. It's got a good reputation. I'm not sure I want more of the Packers stink on this team. I mean, always every time the Vikings have ever picked up an old Packer, Ryan Longwell and Darren Sharper and blah, 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 the list goes on. You get all this crap from Packer fans. You hear it that, the Vikings are picking up their scrubs, and that's how bad they are, And so part of that is there, but his reputation is apparently so good, and they talk about how well he's done with the line over there, and you got to say they have, because that's part of the success that Rodgers has had is certainly attributed to a long-time consistent offensive line that has kept him upright and kept him healthy until the last few years. So maybe there's something there, and I would love them to bring somebody in that could really bolster this offensive line. I don't know if this is the guy. I mean, you really hear more and more how they miss Tony Sperano, and they were kind of adrift this year. I mean, I saw someone comparing their numbers this year to last year with and without Sperano. Maybe it was Arif Hassan that was doing it, but it made a lot of sense that they without him around, things really kind of went in the tank. Injuries aside, but they really struggled without him.
I've made this argument a few times just because it's part of the Cousins versus Keenum thing. You look at the line under Sperano, I think was Reef, Easton, Elflein, Berger, Remmers at right tackle, which I would, if we had that line, I would be very happy.
You wouldn't. They were good. They weren't great, but
I know, but they were good enough to they were just so much better.
They were good with a quarterback that could read the pressure, Joe. I mean, Keenum got, he can read the pressure, and he got out of there a lot more often. I don't know if that's still a good enough line for Cousins, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's, I'll just, we don't need to get into that, but I'll just say, with the changes they had to make for the line during the bye week and the playoffs last year was closer to the line that we had, and Keenum got, those first two turnovers against the Eagles were on the line, if you ask me.
They definitely were.
But I think Philbin is similar to Sperano just in pedigree, I'm a little surprised he would take an offensive line coaching job, considering he was the coach for the Packers the last few games and has been an offensive coordinator for, an offense that is always up there, that is always, for talking heads at least, good enough to make it to the Super Bowl. The Packers, are always somebody's pick to go to the Super Bowl. So I would be super happy with that move. Sperano had a similar pedigree coming in. He was a former coach for the Dolphins, so on and so forth. And so, and it's also nice to have another guy with that much experience just in the coaching room, I think.
I would agree. I mean, I think it would be good. I think, I think he's had his opportunities to be head coach now for two teams technically, and I'm not sure that he wants it. He's a lot older dude. I got to say he's in his 60s, right? And
I think so.
So I don't know that he would. He's probably had his taste of it and saw the crap that goes along with being a head coach, and it would be nice to have that kind of stability, mental stability on the offense, where when you got this young guy that Stefanski, who's starting out and doing his, someone who can help you. I mean, there wasn't just a year ago that the Vikings had like 4 or 5 former head coaches on their team. Yeah, Schumer and Norv Turner and Zimmer and Sperano. It was crazy. So I think there's value in that. And I think Philbin impresses me as the kind of guy that would not be undercutting his superiors, even if they're younger than him. And I think he's the kind of guy that would come in there and really be the guy to, help Zimmer, be a confidant for Zimmer, like the guy that he hadn't had, that he lost in Sperano. I don't know what he's like, but it seems like he's that kind of guy, a real team guy. And so I would be excited about it too. I'd have to just put on my earplugs when all the Packers start chirping about it.
Well, as long as they are successful, then we can gloat too. So there's that other side of the sword, I guess. But speaking of coordinators, George Edwards has had some interviews as well.
He had more than one. I knew he had one in Tampa. I didn't know if he had any others.
Yeah.
Is that the Rooney Rule, you think? I mean, can I say that? I don't mean to.
No, I mean it's. I've heard that elsewhere. Because I think I said that about somebody else last week, and I was like, I don't know. I feel maybe uncomfortable saying that. You would think that in a vacuum, he's definitely should get that opportunity. I mean, the Vikings defense statistically has been in top 5. In a lot of categories, they were the best defense overall last season, over Jacksonville. So you would think so. The reason I said it in a vacuum is because it does seem like, again, that these teams really want offensive-minded, younger guys. So if that's the way people are going, it might seem odd to bring in a guy who is like a Brad Childress of the defense, Childress under I Am the Walrus, Goo Goo Gachu, Andy Reid. He didn't call any plays, and Edwards doesn't call any plays. And so you always have that question whether or not they'd be able to do it. Mm-hmm. But I think I can't imagine many people more qualified for the opportunity. It's just,
I don't know, Joe. I just don't understand. I feel kind of bad for him because he hasn't had the opportunity in 5 years to call defensive plays, maybe a game here or there, and staying here really doesn't prove his lot to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's a super nice guy. I love his interview sessions because he's always very cordial. He doesn't tread into the controversial waters very often, and will defer things to the head coach that he not supposed to talk about, like injuries and such. But he seems like a really decent guy. Seems like his players really enjoy working for him, and I think he would be that kind of steady influence as a head coach, maybe. But I don't know how he gets there, and I feel kind of bad. It's like who's the other head coach? What's the guys from Vic? What's his name? Fangio, yeah. Fangio from Detroit or Chicago. He's going out to Denver, and he says he's going to call the plays because that's what they hired me for, And so it's like, it's just an interesting thing where these guys that come from the defense don't want to let it go. They think nobody can do it better, and to be honest, they've had some success. So. Where you figure maybe George Edwards got to get a full-time DC position somewhere, and you'd think one of those would open up, and once he does that, then maybe he can take the next step to the head coach. But that's not the way it's done these days. Now they go so quickly from quarterback's coach and
from intern to head coach.
Yes, it's crazy.
Yeah, there seems to be an increasing call from people even like Paul Allen for Edwards to call plays and for Zimmer to be a true head coach. The thing that I heard this week from Paul Allen was that Zimmer needs to focus more on game day things, clock management, and maybe when to challenge and when not to challenge, like we saw in the Bears game, which things turned out okay, but when he challenged that 4th down,
right,
in the live chat, people were saying, okay, this has all the trimmings to be one of the worst coaching decisions in Vikings history. And again, it worked out fine.
I was calling it the most Vikings thing ever if they didn't make it.
And a lot of you're at the game, and some people are watching it on just broadcast television. Some people are watching it on satellite, and some people are streaming it. And the stream is always a good 2 plays behind anyway. And some people get irked by people ahead of them telling them in the live chat what happened.
Yeah.
But I will say, one of the saving graces for me emotionally during the games is the fact for when you're there, you letting me know ahead of time. You basically said, okay, crisis averted, I think is what you said.
Right.
My Apple Watch went from like a good 190 beats per minute to its normal resting rate.
I have to watch that because I would be bitter if I was on the other end of that. So I try not to do too much of that. But that situation,
you do a good job of not doing it too much. But yeah, you had to, and I'm really glad you did.
I can't remember what point I was going to make. Oh yeah, did you see what the Falcons have done? Hired some guy or giving the clock management and challenge duties, handing it over to some underling that's not the head coach or the coordinator.
I hadn't heard that. Like that, would that be their main responsibility?
Yes, that's what they're going to do. And
wow.
Check that out. I thought it was kind of interesting, and it certainly speaks to the fact that there's a lot of pressure in those decisions, and maybe you need someone that's all they're focusing on. But you know what? They have to do it the same way, and the pressure's then on them to make the right decisions. But maybe when you're up there in a broadcast or you're watching it somewhere else and you can get replays and you can see it and you can say, hey, you got to challenge this, or you've got the charts in front of you, or I don't know. It really should be interesting to see if that's something that catches on, because it kind of made some headlines the other day, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And it's funny because ultimately the head coach has still got to make the call on he's responsible for it, but maybe it's a way of giving him more information to make that decision.
I got to look that up. That's super interesting. I wonder what the title is. It's like they're almost creating an entirely new position.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
some guys in game duties that didn't have a lot. It's like he's an assistant, deep assistant that can. Because I don't think they brought in somebody new, but I think they just said that's what this guy's going to do during games. But I have to go back and read it myself. But
so I've been in this like 2-month long debate / argument on Reddit about Mike Prefer with this one guy, who I've come to the conclusion has to be Mike Prefer himself, because nobody else would defend somebody for this long. I guess you could say on the other side, then what am I doing? But you had, when we were talking about the agenda last night, you had mentioned the thoughts on the Prefer move. I did write an article about 2 weeks ago that I will say I don't that they were re-signing him.
Has that been for sure yet?
That's the question. I'm gonna look it up real quick because I had seen that and then I blacked out and woke up. I was covered in blood
I saw that it was reported they were trying to. I haven't I looked it up just before they got on the show to see if something had happened, and nothing's been announced yet. So it sounds like they're trying to resign him. His contract must be up, and
yeah, you're right. It's they're looking to do it, and that's it. And then like the third article is an article by one of our writers, Grant, or / the instructive. Actually, no, this one's by Jeremy Beam. There was another. So we have, if you type in Mike Prefer Vikings on Google News, we have the third and fourth article. purplePTSD.com does. One is by Jeremy Beam, and the other is by Grant / the instructive scholar. And his article basically is that
he wanted the assistant gone, which I didn't quite agree with.
His name is Ficken. He's saying Ficken is the cause of all these issues. Right. I wrote the article I wrote. I don't think I've ever had as much as damn near in a unanimous agreement, especially on Reddit, as I did for that. It was 300 comments, all praising the article except for one guy whose point has changed multiple times. It's almost like the Mueller thing with the Trump campaign. It's like, we know, then it's like, oh yeah, we held a meeting, but we got no information from it. Like you always know somebody is on the losing end of an argument, not to get political, but when their argument changes as they realize they're wrong, they have to adapt and create
the definition of Trump.
Yeah, and I don't see how people don't see that. I mean, just objectively, why his argument has changed so much. And this guy's doing the same thing, and I keep telling him, these arguments that you're making, you created them right now. I've never heard them elsewhere. We'll never hear them again. Arguments like, you can't coach kickers. You can't ask punters if they are able to hold the ball or even pick up on that by watching video. He keeps mocking me because I said, can't they just pass an eye test? And he's like, there's no such thing as an eye test. I don't know if he thinks I'm talking about like an actual exam from an eye doctor.
What's the point? You want Prefer gone?
Yes, and I for a myriad of reasons, and none of them really have to do with Chris Kluwe or that aspect of it. Even though we've interacted with Kluwe on this show, and I just talked to Kluwe this week actually because he helped promote our Patreon. And he's a stand-up guy, and I can't imagine he would lie. He didn't benefit from it, obviously. But I just look at the history of the kicking game and the average of basically having a new punter and a new kicker every season or season and a half. And whether it's fair or not, the buck stops somewhere. And it just seems to me that I don't know why he continues to be employed when he either has somebody who, like Kai Forbath, who they should have kept, but they have the hubris of saying, well, we can get a younger kicker that's cheaper that can hit as many field goals, but also we'll increase the extra point amount, or just drafting the wrong guys from a scouting perspective. It's just...
See my story?
Which one?
The one where I said the pressure's on the kicking game.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I mean, I didn't mention Prefer once, and I don't necessarily agree with Grant. And I don't necessarily agree with you. I see what, as far as the assistant, I didn't even know who he was, and the practices I've watched, it's always Prefer involved in running these drills. Now, we haven't seen them during the season and what they're doing, so I don't know all of that. I'm sure these assistants do plenty, but I really think it has more to do with Mike Zimmer and the pressure he puts on these guys, whether it's actual pressure or just pressure due to the scowl on his face and his disgust and his problems with the fact that they lose games by the kicking game. I mean, ever since Blair Walsh went wide left, the reputation has increased that Zimmer is just a brooding mass, or over the top of these guys, and they're just they're going to feel pressure. I mean, I talked about Carlson. I thought it was the right move at the time because I thought the Vikings were a team that you couldn't take a rookie kicker into these pressure situations and expect him to perform but then he goes out to Oakland and does well. Now you give Oakland a team that's going to win some ball games, and some pressure situations are going to come down to the end of the game to win it for Daniel Carlson, and I'm not sure he'll have the same record as he did in that no pressure situation out there. But I can go either way with Prefer. The special teams have not been great, but they haven't been terrible. They had some struggles this year. I'm not gonna. Ultimately, when they go out on the field, I don't know if it's lack of training that they're missing field goals. I think it's pressure, and I don't know if Prefer exerts that more or Zimmer does. So
I just feel like something has to change. You have two kickers I think Blair Walsh was a 5th rounder as well, but wasn't as high. I know Carlson was the highest drafted kicker in team history. And you're right, and maybe it is Zimmer, but Zimmer's not going anywhere. And you have, Zimmer making that move, 3-4 weeks into the season, because he is sick of it. You can just tell that he feels like, I put in 100, 120 hours a week. I'm, basically sacrificing like all this stuff, and then we lose because of a freaking field goal, and it's clearly something that wears on him and that he has no patience for. Obviously, he made that move with Carlson, and so it's at some point somebody has to be held accountable, and even Dan Bailey figured things out, and a lot of those were based on the hold and not necessarily him, but it's when you have a guy who you have to say was the second most accurate kicker in NFL history, but now he isn't because he missed a bunch of field goals for the Vikings. It's just like
he dropped a 5th.
Yeah, I remember I was watching one of the games with Tyler Haig, our production manager for Purple Territory Radio. He looked at me and he goes, "I don't know what it is, man, but when kickers put on a purple jersey, it does. They're so good before and after, but something happens when they put on this purple jersey, and I don't know what it is. I just think that
I would go ahead and make your point.
No, I was just gonna say I just think that again the buck stops somewhere, and he's been bailed out a little bit by Sherrills and Patterson being these amazing returners, but when it comes to kicking, just they've gone through so many guys.
I would grant you that Prefer not knowing that Matt Weil has never been taught how to hold. That's on Prefer. I mean, how do you not know that your holder has never been taught how to hold?
Yeah, and it's a guy it wasn't even like a guy coming out of college. He'd been on other NFL teams, so you think you would know that.
Yes, you've got to, before you sign a guy like that, you got to do your due diligence on that. You need a new punter, but this punter better be able to do everything else that he's going to be required of him on game day. That I Prefer's culpable for, but I don't know. I mean, Prefer was like this stud, just a few years ago on the team. They kept him around here for, because he was with the previous regime because he did so well. Now it's the players, or is it the coach? Well. You're crediting the players of Patterson and what's his face Sherrills. Well, if you're giving them credit for what they have done, then you've got to give the players the blame when they don't perform as well. So I don't know that I make a change just for change's sake, and that's what it sounds like you're advocating.
No, not at all. Not for it's change for change's sake in that. There's a history of underperformance and blowing games, and it's not. I can understand why you think that was my conclusion, but I meant that if it is Zimmer, which it very well could be, Zimmer is not going anywhere. So right. Something needs to change. Is my point.
That's change for change.
No, because I'm saying it needs to change because it's horrible. That's not change for change's sake. That's saying, okay, if one guy can't leave, then I put the blame on both of them. Somebody has to, fair or unfair, make this work under Zimmer, and clearly Prefer isn't that person. So bring somebody else in. Because the track record is laughable at this point to me, and it's not change for change's sake. It's just that if anything, it's another knock against Zimmer, but Zimmer's not going anywhere. So, like you said, Prefer. You ask that question or you watch that tape.
Right.
Bringing in Blair Walsh and Daniel Carlson, both guys who are kind of the same guy, SEC kickers, with big legs who had bad senior years. They had the yips. And the hubris to me is that he thinks he can fix it despite the fact that he has no track record of doing anything but making things worse. So The last thing I wanted to say is just, roll the dice and get somebody else. I think that when you're averaging a new punter and a new kicker almost every season, and it seems to be getting worse, you got to make a move.
Yeah, you go down the line. Blair Walsh clearly doesn't have the head for the game because he didn't play at all last year, and he had a terrible year up in Seattle when he left here, and blah blah blah. And Kai Forbath, I looked at the numbers in my piece at these guys when they did come in here, and Tyler's right. Under Zimmer, they seem to struggle a little bit, and you wonder if that he's such a taskmaster that they just feel pressure when they're in the games that they got to make him happy or they'll down the road. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case, but a case could be made for it because then they leave here and Kai Forbath ended up doing very well in a very small sample size for Jacksonville at the end of the year. So it's I don't know. To me, it's such a fluky thing. I think it's hard to find somebody that has the right mentality of the leg and the skills like a Vinatieri or a Gostkowski or some of these guys that just keep making clutch
Matt
kicks.
Parkey.
Pardon me?
Or Parkey in Chicago?
Or Prater in Detroit. But yeah, no, Parkey's another one. That's who I started my story out by. That's what sent me off on it, is saying that he missed 11 kicks this year, which is bad. And I can't believe he still has a job. But I don't think
you have Robbie Gould down in San Francisco, who they got rid of, who is breaking records.
Once again, for a team that is going nowhere, I think it's all about pressure for these guys. I compare it to the golf swing. I did in the story. I just say, hey, you're just like as a golf swing, that ball's just sitting there. All you have to do is pretty much just kick it the same way each time, and maybe adjusting for wind and or length of blah 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 and trajectory a little bit, but. It's the same thing in golf, and you just have to repeat it. And the one thing that comes in is that you put pressure on yourself, and that's when your swing goes to hell, and that's when so does your kick. I mean, I talked with Ryan Longwell. I mean, a lot of kickers are good golfers for that reason alone. Yeah. There's a lot of similarities there.
Probably good bowlers too.
Yeah, I did a story on it with Ryan Longwell a long time ago talking about it, and I think it's fascinating. But so I think it has more to do with pressure now. If Prefer's telling him, if you don't make this kick, I'm going to get fired. So you got to make this kick. Somebody that I don't know, but I just think that I think Zimmer's trying because he kept saying, "Oh God, I believe that Dan Billy's going to make these kicks." I'm surprised he didn't, because he does it every day in practice. Yep. He's trying to say the right things. So I think it's a bigger thing than the coaching myself. I don't know that there's that much coaching to be done.
It did seem like they changed a little bit their approach in the media when talking about kickers too, at least with Daniel Carlson. And initially, I felt like they did say the right things, and then with Daniel Carlson, they seemed to be a lot tougher in the media, and I felt like maybe they thought that they babied the other kickers too much, and that if they took a hard line on Carlson, it would maybe help. But I'll never forget that Green Bay kick, the last one that he missed, and because I've never seen a kicker before his leg gets back down to the ground yell the F word like that. They're usually, you don't see them emoting that way, and to me that's when I was like, this guy's broken. Man.
Yeah, he he kicks like I play golf. He just kick and hope. I hit it and hope, and you know right away it's not going to work. So
it is. I said we were all chatting on Slack during that Bears game, and I said twice he's going to miss this. I was so nervous and I had nothing riding on that game at all, obviously. But I was just like, God, the pressure, you could create a diamond with a thing of charcoal. It's amazing. It's super interesting, and the guys that are good at it must just be able to not give a shit, basically, because that's the only way that it would not drive somebody crazy.
I'm working for the Timberwolves, and there was a late game. The Wolves were playing Charles Barkley and the Phoenix Suns, I think, at the time, and Chris Carr was his name, playing for the Wolves, that had 2 free throws at the end of the game to win it. It was all he had to do, and the fans were just going nuts. It was just crazy. The music was pounding, and Charles Barkley walks up past him at the free throw line after a timeout and whispers something in his ear, and Carr proceeds to miss the 2 free throws, and the Wolves lose the game. And asked him after what he said. He goes, "I just told him that his ass is so puckered he couldn't jackhammer a pin up there right now." So it's another one of those things. It's like, you're not reacting. It's you in the basket, and you have to do this thing you've done a million times in practice. But pressure changes it, and it's crazy how even at this level, pressure at that level, pressure changes it. I really think that's a huge proponent, and I think Zimmer's got to take his kickers and go to a spa before every game. Just get some aromatherapy going, and really everybody's relaxed. You're going to make that kick.
Or they should hotbox in Zimmer's car, smoke some weed. I don't know if that would help or if that would hurt, but something. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll be doing the Q&A solo after the show if you're listening live. Otherwise, I'll post a link to it in the description. About the Labor is back. They're going to be recording, I believe, Thursday nights. They're trying out something a little different where they're going to focus on 1 or 2 breaking topics on video because they believe that video is the future, which I also think that's where this is all going, but I think there's room for obviously every sort of media and content. So check out the About the Labor show that is up on the sites right now, and keep an eye on purplePTSD and Vikings Territory. We are hanging out in the message board a lot if you want to stop by and talk to some of the writers or vent about the team or react to some of the decisions that they're making. There's just a lot to talk about. Obviously, we didn't even get to everything on our agenda, so there's just there's just a ton to talk about. So we hope you can stop by the message board and chat with us. But again, this has been Morning Joe's. Check out the Q&A afterwards, and we'll be back next Wednesday. We're going to be recording on Wednesdays during the off season, as opposed to Tuesdays and Fridays. But we appreciate all your support, and we look forward to spending some time with you this off season. So thanks for listening, and skol.